Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Arena Talks. Thank you guys so much for coming back for another episode. Today, we're going to have a look at the 21s game from the other evening, and then we're also going to have a little chat about the under-18s victory from the weekend as well. Let's start with the 21s then. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Disappointing result, right? 4-1 to Huddersfield in the EFL trophy. That means we're now knocked out of the competition. So going into the game, we only needed a point to go through. We won our first game and we drew our second game, but won it on penalties. So we gained that additional point. So I was quite confident about us going through a couple of weeks before the game. But when I realised that the game fell during the international break, I became a bit more sceptical about going through. And that's not to put down the players that played that evening, because the players that were out on that pitch would have backed themselves to go through and get that point. But the amount of players that were missing because of the international break, and key players as well, right? Key players such as, Jack Fletcher, Ethan Wheatley, Gabe Biancheri, James Scanlon, all these sort of players, many, many more, right? It just made the squad weaker, and it made it harder for us to sort of pose that threat throughout the whole of the 90 minutes. So whilst I don't want to talk about the performance and the game too much, one thing that I do want to touch on is sort of this idea of managing expectations, because as someone that follows the academy a lot and someone that has a large following now, I think it's really important for me to touch on these sort of things. So the only Premier League team that's gone through into the next round of the EFL trophy is Aston Villa. Every other Premier League team that entered is out. That just puts into context and perspective how difficult this competition is. And it's not necessarily there to it's not necessarily there for Premier League clubs to win it. It's just there more so for player development, and that players can get used to playing against lower league opposition, playing against players that have got a lot of experience in the game, who are more physical. You can go to away grounds and sort of get a feel of the atmosphere there, and have United fans come and follow you as well. All of these sort of things are excellent tools that aid in player development. So that's generally the main purpose of the competition. It's disappointing that we're out, but like I said, the learning opportunities it'll give for the players is immense, and it'll be something that they can carry into their careers. And one of those players that would have gained from the learning opportunities from that evening was Sekou Kone. Sekou Kone then, what were my thoughts on that performance? Going into the game beforehand, I was really looking forward to watching him play. I think if I could compare it, it was very similar to when Ahmad made his debut for the 23s. I think in terms of my personal excitement and the hype that was on social media, it was very similar. And going into the game, obviously I've seen him play for Mali at the Under-17s World Cup and watched some of those games, but in terms of watching him for United, I haven't been able to do that yet, because both games that he's played have not been televised. So for 99% of the fan base, the other night, that was the first chance to watch him play live. So oddly enough, the first thing that stood out to me was his height. At the World Cup, he did look quite tall, because of, obviously it's Under-17s World Cup. You're playing with younger players and naturally shorter players. So when he stepped out onto the pitch, I was quite surprised by, not say how short he was, but he just looked shorter. I thought he was about 6 foot, but he is much shorter than that. So he hasn't got that quite imposing frame that I thought he did have. What did I think of his performance then? To start, I was so impressed. There was a couple of actions. I'm just watching back the clips now. There's a moment where the ball's in the air and he's being pressed from this side, right? And he just touches down the ball, brushes past one player. He gets pressed by another. He then just skips past him. Another player starts to come and press him, and he knocks the ball past him like it's nothing and just breezes through the midfield and plays a nice ball into the striker. And there was a couple of moments like that where you could see his talent on the ball and his ability to use his body to manipulate angles and to go past players. And he was getting about the pitch and tackling players. And like I said, I was really impressed with the start of the performance. And it just seemed, as the game got on, he started to get a bit sloppy. There was a couple of moments where he miscontrolled the ball and lost possession, and he was slipping quite a lot. He actually went off injured because of kind of like a combination of those two things. So the slipping and the miscontrolling of the ball. There was a moment where he was kind of reaching for a mistouch, and was stretching and he got tackled, and it looked like quite a bad one. He actually was pictured and seen coming out the stadium with a protective boot. So get well soon for him. I really hope it's nothing serious. It didn't look great, but let's just hope that it comes out better than we expected, because it'd be a real shame for him to get injured this early in his career. And people have made some parallels about, the same thing happened to Mainu and the same thing happened to Yoro. Look how well Mainu bounced back, right? And I'm sure that Yoro's going to do the same thing. So it's not all doom and gloom. Again, with Kone, I want to talk about like the expectations thing again, because I think people think that when we sign players for $1 million at 17 and 18, that they think that when they come in, they're just going to be the finished article already. And it's just so far away from the truth, regardless of whether you buy them at 13 or 14 or 17 or 18, right? Unless you're spending an insane amount of money, like 40, 50, 60 million on a player that age, you're not going to get the finished article. And even then, look at someone like Endrick, right, at Madrid. They've spent all that money on him, and he's struggling to get into the team. So even these elite talents, they struggle to transition into men's football, and that's normal. And in Kone's case particularly, he's come from Africa, from a Malian academy. He's not come from some top 5 European League academy. And it's not to diminish the talent that's in Africa, because there are so many talented players from Africa. It's just the resources that they have available, and the training and the coaches and all these sort of things, the tactical side of things. All of these things are going to be completely new to Kone, in the sense of the levels that he had in Africa versus where they're at now at United. So these are all things that he needs to adjust to, as well as the culture, as well as the language, as well as the way of living and his teammates. All of these sort of things are happening right now for him. For him to come in and put in a 10 out of 10 performance was just not realistic. So I saw a lot of people online, slate the performance and say that it was rubbish and all this sort of stuff. And it's just, we need to be more sensible in the way that we approach this. He started really well. He showed what he was capable of. He tailed off as the half went on, because the intensity was increasing, and he's not used to that at the moment. He's not played enough games. So that was expected. And I'm more willing to look at this glass half full than glass half empty, and look at the positives from that game, and look at those little actions that I was telling you about, the sort of moments where you could see that there's a player there. And I'm more willing to focus on that than focus on him slipping or miscontrolling the ball, because those are actions that don't necessarily correlate to him being a bad footballer. It could be that he's just needing more game time, and these are sort of things that are going to get ironed out as time goes on. I want to move on, and I want to talk about the under-18s game now. I want to talk about Mantato, and I want to talk about Chido Obi-Martin, and we're going to look in depth at some of the clips from the game. So rather than talk about the game as a whole, because let's be honest, the under-18s are just insane. They're so good. They don't need any more analysis. So I just want to talk more so now specifically about some things that I noticed from individual players in that game. Briefly then on Mantato, he's someone that I really like to look at now for quite a couple of years. He initially came into under-18s as a left back, and he's still currently playing left back for the England under-17. So England, I don't know whether they view him as a left back, or whether it's the case of they haven't got as many left backs in that age group, and that the forward players in that age group are so good that they just prefer him playing at left back. I think that's probably the more likely option, is that latter option. But in terms of United, he got moved to right wing last season, and he's not looked back really. There's been a couple of articles lately about him being potentially a player that could be suitable for Amorim's system, and I could definitely see that in terms of him being that right wing back as a left footer that can cut in, very similar to Quenda in Sporting's system currently. But he is only 16, and that's something that we need to kind of remind ourselves of, is that if he is going to come into the first team, it's not going to be for quite a while. But what I would say about Bendito Mantato is that he's definitely got that right framework to come into first team football, and you could envisage his game translating well into senior football, because he's got that physicality, he's got that intensity, he's got that pace, that sharpness, he's good at riding challenges, he's got that kind of low centre of gravity where he's quite a powerful runner, and that low centre of gravity helps him in those kind of scenarios. So these little things, they are indicators, that would suggest that he could translate that into senior football. Thinking with like an objective or a critical hat on, I would like him to work on his game when he slowed it down, because at the moment he is playing at 100 miles per hour. He is so direct, so intense in his actions. He doesn't give the fullback a moment's rest, and he's going 1v1 at almost every opportunity. And these are all good things. They're not bad things. They're great. But there are going to be some scenarios where that doesn't work. So you need to branch out into other areas of your game that you could tap into. So, for example, when you slow the game down, you can combine with other players and bring other players into the game and make them help you rather than you feeling the need to do it all yourself. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because there was a game about 3 or 4 weeks ago against Spurs in the Premier League Cup. He started right wing that game and he played against a really, really physical, tall, athletic fullback, and he struggled. He struggled to go past him and things just weren't working out for him. And in the second half, he got moved to left back and Shea Lacey went at right wing. And Shea just made a complete mockery of the fullback. And you guys know Shea by now. He's not a tall player. He's not an athletic player. He's not a strong player. He is someone that uses his intelligence and his IQ. And you watch him play and he's walking with the ball for a lot of the times. And he'll just switch it up like that and he's gone past someone. And Mantato, you can tell, and we'll get into this now in some of the clips I'm going to talk about, he is also a very intelligent player, and you can tell by the actions in the games that he's very clever and he knows what he's doing. So this isn't a case of, Mantato being just an athletic player and Lacey being really intelligent. It's not that at all. It's just that Shea approached the game and approached the fullback differently to what Mantato did, and it worked a lot better for Lacey. I want to see Mantato work on that side of his game, but let's get into some of the clips that I wanted to talk about. In my preparation for this video, I watched the game back a couple of times on 2x speed, and the thing that stood out to me the most, particularly with Mantato, is the way he receives the ball on the wing. And it reminded me so much of a segment that Ian Wright, I think it was Ian Wright, did on Bukayo Saka on Match of the Day a couple of years ago. And it was talking about the way that Saka positions his body to receive the ball. And what he was doing is that he was making sure that in almost all scenarios that he wasn't back facing the goal. So when he was receiving the ball, he wasn't facing the way that the ball was coming from. Because if you do that, you're back facing the goal and you're doing this sort of backing into the fullback thing where you either just have to sort of hold them off or you just play it back to the fullback. What he was doing is that he was opening his body out in a certain way where he could explode straight away into the centre of the midfield, or he could spin the other side. And you'll see in the clips now that this is something that Mantato does perfectly, and he was doing it all game. Let's start with this clip then. So ball with the centre-back, plays it out wide to Mantato, and we're just going to stop it there. I'm going to do my best Jamie and Carragher impression here. So see how the fullback should be closer, right? The fullback should be closer, but the way he receives the ball, it's on his right foot, and boom, he can now go into the midfield or he can go down the line, and the fullback doesn't know. So here's a similar example of kind of what I'm talking about. Again, ball gets played out to him, and you see how he makes that instep into midfield. And I think here he wanted to explode into midfield, but the ball just gets stuck under his feet, and he doesn't quite project the ball properly. So that idea gets scrapped, and then boom, he's away. We're going to move on to the second half now, and this is another really interesting scenario. If you look at this one, you can see that he actually receives the ball, like I was saying to you earlier on. He's facing the wrong way, and he realises almost straight away that I've got to crack that. So he makes that little touch there, and boom, he can now come inside or he can go down the line. There's definitely kind of like this conscious effort, and it might just be natural, right, because it's something that he's done for a long time. But this is something that the best wingers do. They receive the ball in these sort of ways so that they don't put themselves into a corner and don't box themselves in. And yeah, just in general, the fullback had no idea what he was doing and couldn't read whether he was going to come inside or go down the line, and Bendito just tore him a new one basically, and that's going to happen to a lot of fullbacks this year. He obviously got that lovely goal as well, and that takes him up to 6 goals in 8 league games this season, so he's really putting up the numbers as well. Let's finish then by talking about and analysing some of Chido's clips from the game. Obviously another goal, it's customary for him now, but I want to talk more in detail about some of the things that really excited me. This is one of the clips that I really liked. So the ball gets played into him, and you see, again, going back to kind of like that Bendito Mantato thing again. So he's holding off the defender and he's a bit stuck, but immediately he spins around and he's shifting it onto his shooting foot, right? He's a big guy, you know, he's 6'4", and he probably could just back into that defender and probably reach the goal. He knows that that's not going to help him in the long term, and he'll never get afforded that amount of time at the elite level, but it's good to see that he's bringing in these good habits into his game rather than abusing his physique and his strength. One thing I liked about his game as well is how involved he was, in the sense that he could have had 3 or 4 goals. There was a moment where Thwaite put in a lovely ball to him and he just headed it wide, and he would have been really disappointed with that one because that was a really good chance. He also had a shot cleared off the line, and there was a couple of other occasions where he did really nicely to create that shot separation and get a shot on goal. So it's just really good to see that he's creating opportunities for himself and getting in positions where he's got the chance to score. And we know that's a massive strength of his, right? You don't score 32 goals in a season for Arsenal's under-18s and not be good at those sort of things. But it's just pleasing to see that he's carrying on that form at United. And just to keep it balanced as well, so that I'm not constantly bringing up positives and advantages so that people go away and think that it's the perfect player. There was plenty of occasions where, you know, he lost control of the ball and, you know, perhaps didn't pick the right pass, or, you know, miscontrolled it, or had his passes intercepted. So there's plenty of things that he can work on, and that side of his game is definitely something where he's probably going to spend most of his time, because in terms of goal scoring and in front of goal, he just looks ice cold. And it reminds me a lot of Martial, in the sense that he would get into a scenario and you were convinced that he was going to score. He was always going to pick the right finish. And I made that comparison, actually. There was a clip that I posted on my Twitter account where he runs into the box and he does this little shuffle, and it literally looked exactly like Martial. And funnily enough, when he scored on the weekend, he did that same celebration that Martial does as well. But yeah, drawing away from the Martial comparisons, I'm really happy with how he's playing, and really, he's one of those players that you see him in the starting lineup and you think this game's going to be interesting. So that's going to be that for today. Thank you guys for joining me again for another video. I hope this has been quite informative for you, and if you've got any feedback or any thoughts about the video, let me know in the comments. I try to reply to everyone, and I really appreciate every like, view and comment. So thank you guys so much, and I'll see you guys soon.